We have many hours' work yet to do today, so I don't see why we should be dawdling any further. We've just completed issue 3, which is on call, and we will be leaving all issues open and on call as members are in and out of the committee room. Our next items, issues 4 and 5, deal with Hastings College of Law, to be found on page 7 and 8. Mr. Lao, welcome.
Paul Golozewski with the LAO. The first issue before you is a governor's January proposal for a $1 million ongoing general fund increase for the Hastings College of the Law. The funding is unrestricted, so Hastings would have discretion in terms of how it spends the increase. In our February analysis, we raised some concerns regarding the given the discretion for Hastings to spend the funding. We reviewed Hastings' budget plan and looked at how it would spend the money. I'll touch briefly on 2 areas. The first is enrollment. The second is financial aid. The state historically hasn't had an enrollment policy for Hastings. Unlike with UC or CSU, for example, with their eligibility pools, the state hasn't had a criteria for how many students Hastings should serve or what criteria they should use to select them. We think that's something that you might want to consider moving forward, is crafting an enrollment policy. For 2016-17, Hastings' plan is to reduce enrollment by 3.7%. This is coming on top of other reductions in recent years in enrollment that Hastings says is due to a decrease in demand for lawyers. The second area that we touched on in our analysis was financial aid. Similar to enrollment, the state hasn't had a policy for financial aid at Hastings in terms of how much aid to provide or what type of aid. Most financial aid at Hastings is merit-based. It's designed to attract students with higher GPAs and test scores. Hastings has increased spending in this area notably in recent years, increasing by about 50% from 14-15 to 16-17. And we think this is another area where the legislature might want to consider whether spending on this is a high state priority at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Golozewski. I wanted to ask you about the enrollment policy, in that Hastings, if not uncommon, is unique among our institutes of learning in that it has by design reduced its enrollment, as opposed to recognizing there is an ever-growing need, especially in our undergraduate systems, and that we need to have an enrollment policy and even set some goals. This is quite different, recognizing it is, number one, a professional education, but also at a time when, as they have themselves identified, potentially an overabundance of these professional trained attorneys for the work environment. So how does an enrollment policy work or provide benefit when they are downsizing by design?
With enrollment budgeting, it can work both ways. So as students are added to the system, you would increase funding. If students fewer students are being served, you would decrease funding. In this situation, the state has been increasing funding in recent years while Hastings has been decreasing enrollment. So I think that's been our primary concern, is we don't think there's a strong rationale for the state to provide more funding if they're going to be serving fewer students. I think we agree with Hastings that there has been a decrease in demand for lawyers, so we don't necessarily take issue with the enrollment reduction. I think we more take issue with the idea of increasing funding while they're serving fewer students.
Okay, point well taken. I think it should also be noted that this, I think, is their 5th consecutive year of not increasing their tuition. And I remember having these conversations a few years back when Governor Brown's predecessor had attempted to zero out general fund support for Hastings College of Law before he realized that if he did so, the general fund impact would be many times greater, given that we have an arrangement with the estate of former Supreme Court Justice Hastings, whose family left this to the state of California prior to the formation of the University of California system itself, and that we would have owed them interest on their gift over 100 and near 50 years, and that wasn't going to be a wise fiscal decision for that administration. But at that time, when we had those discussions, we were informed that even though this is a public institution, I think they get less than 10% of their operating budget from public dollars, and they privately raise 90% of their operating budget. So it's hardly as if they are an imposition on the state of California. 90%, I think they're, one could say, carrying their weight.
That's all true. The amount of state general fund support was cut back during the recession. Tuition increased, so now tuition comprises a much greater share of their support versus general fund.
Okay, Ms. Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposal before the committee is the governor's budget proposal of $1 million augmentation to the base budget for Hastings College. This amount is consistent with the administration's multi-year funding proposal for all of our public higher education segments, or excuse me, UC and CSU. So this is just the commensurate amount for Hastings.
Would you like to respond to that?
I think we've had concerns with the governor's budgeting approach for UC and CSU as well.
Okay.
So the same sort of rationale applies to Hastings.
You're being consistent. Yes. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Costa? All right. We have a motion to approve as proposed by Senator Wolk. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? We have some public comment on this. If not, call the roll, please.
Leno.
Aye.
Nielsen. Aye. Allen. Anderson. Aye. Bell. Block. Aye. Glazer. Aye. Hancock. Mitchell. Monning. Aye. Morlock. Aye. Wynn. Aye. Pan. Pavley. Roth. Stone. Aye. Wolk.
That vote is 10-0. We will keep it open for absent members. And then moving on to issue 5 on page 8, which is the academic building replacement project for Hastings. Mr. Koliszewski.
This proposal is a spring finance letter requesting an additional $18.75 million in lease revenue bond authority for a project that you approved last year for Hastings. It's a replacement academic building. The budget that you set for the project last year was about $36 million. So this is about a 50% increase in the budget. The administration has submitted information indicating that about $3 million of the $18.8 million increase is related to the need to excavate for the building. Originally, the building was not going to have a below-ground portion, but due to classroom ceiling heights, they want to be able to put a portion below ground. Otherwise, the scope of the project has not changed, so that is the types of programs it's going to house is remained the same. The remainder of the cost increase, the administration has cited various factors, but not necessarily quantified other than the excavation work. They've noted that there have been market rate increases in San Francisco, so the overall cost per square foot has gone up by over $200 per square foot, and they've cited some other factors as well. It is unusual for a project to come back for a cost increase of this size with no change in the scope. We would note And I think other than some of the information about the excavation work, in our opinion, the administration hasn't really identified in great detail exactly what is driving the cost increase.
You might talk to our outgoing general manager of our Trans Bay project, terminal project, which has grown from around $2 billion to, I think, twice that in recent years due to same cost pressures of building anything in San Francisco right now. Ms. Costa.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would just echo some of your comments that there were several factors that came to light regarding this project that are increasing the cost, and that's why we're bringing forward this request as part of a spring finance letter.
Do you have any background information you can share with the committee regarding the need for the building, the state of the existing academic building they're planning to or in the midst of replacing?
Yes, I'd be happy to address that. Sally Lukenbell, Department of Finance. So the existing building was constructed in 1953. It's very old, obviously, and has a lot of systems that are starting to fail. It has systems, electrical systems, HVAC. It's ADA non-compliant, and so it is, it's severely oversized. It's inefficient. The new building would reduce the square footage by about 25% to right-size it for the enrollment and build on building efficiencies. So it's a very old building that is nearing the end of its useful life on a lot of its electrical and mechanical systems.
And bring it into compliance with ADA?
Yes.
And the property is owned by Hastings, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Committee members? Senator Block.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to explain to my colleagues why Sub 1 didn't take an action on this. We have no quarrel with the fact that Hastings needs a new building. In fact, last year when they came to us with a request for $37 million for a new building, we approved it. We were somewhat stunned, I'll speak for myself, not for the whole committee. I was somewhat stunned when they came back this year with not a 5% cost overrun or a 10% cost overrun, with in fact 50%, $18.75 million additional being requested for the same building. It seemed like it was either a very lowball first attempt to get passage by the committee or a pretty incompetent attempt, because the costs weren't unknown 12 months ago. That San Francisco's cost of construction is high. These costs were known, but were not put in the budget. And frankly, most of the 50% cost overrun is not construction cost. It's things like when one of their administrators talked to us, he said, well, they didn't put in the budget the need for tiered seating in classroom buildings. Well, that seems like an important oversight. They didn't put in the budget the need for higher ceilings when you have tiered seating. There were so many different instances of what seemed to be either facts withheld from us a year ago or just not properly calculated when we went into our deliberations a year ago. So all of that goes to then my conclusion that I personally can't support this because, again, not one nail has been driven. This is not a project that's ongoing and all of a sudden the costs are going up. This is a project, we got a budget 12 months earlier that said this is how much it's going to cost, and then all of a sudden it's $18.75 million more on a $36 million building. $18.7 million that could be used for after-school education and services, could be used, as we talked earlier, for child care, early learning, could be used, our independent colleges and universities have gotten their Cal grants cut. Only $3.8 million would restore the Cal grant cut to the independent universities. There are so many places in our budget where these dollars could be used effectively, where there's a crying need for these dollars. We heard in our last segment about the need for these dollars. To throw that toward a project that's 50% over budget that hasn't even started yet seemed to me something I couldn't support. So I'm not going to support it today. I'm not urging my colleagues to not support it because they do need a building. If you feel you've got to support it, that's each person's individual decision. But I'm going to, again, not support this.
Ms. Costa, can you respond to some of those concerns? And if you could also give us an idea of what the consequence would be if we did not approve this?
Yes, I'd be happy to address some of the comments that were made. So unfortunately, the original estimate was based on a cost analysis that was significantly flawed, I would say. It did leave out some significant building components, and that didn't come to light until the programming effort was completed this past December. This project's currently in what's called the performance criteria phase of a design-build project, and programming is one of the major components of this particular phase. And so after much effort in programming and just determining what mechanical systems and other things the building needed in order to deliver Hastings' program, it was determined that it's true there were a number of items that were missed. This estimate was the original estimate was based on more of a commercial type building, kind of a vanilla generic commercial building, and we didn't realize that until we got into the programming effort. So now we know that there were a number of things that were missed, as has been stated here, including subground excavation issues and foundation issues related to that. There's a need for tiered classrooms. Senator Block mentioned that. Also, ceiling heights were incorrect. There's an entire structural system that needs to be, that's unique to this kind of a building because it's such a small footprint, and that's called a clear span structural system that was never accounted for in the original estimates. So there are a number of issues that we're now grappling with.
Thank you for your forthrightness. Can you better educate the committee as to the nature of our relationship, the state, with Hastings in how this process unfolds? So they don't do all this independent of the Department of Finance. They work with the Department of Finance through this process. So if mistakes were made, and we're here to recognize if they were, if we want to attribute that to any party or parties, who's involved with that, who's not. And then also, with full respect for Senator Block's comments, I think it could also be noted that to the degree that we may express some fault and disappointment with determinations made last year, that we might also afford some credit for those parties who made the errors stepping forward immediately rather than coming back a year or two or three from now to say, well, we did find out 3 years ago, but we didn't come tell you then. They're coming to tell us now.
Well, we're fortunate now to have a great team working on this project, and they should get the credit for discovering some of these issues that.
So these would be folks in your office?
Department of General Services.
Department of General Services.
And tremendous advocates for this project, and we have some of the best individuals there working on it, and they've worked tirelessly to kind of define this program and deliver for Hastings what they need to for their academic program. But also, as part of the contract, we have construction management on board. We have a master architect, and all of these individuals, with our participation as well, have reached the conclusion, and by the way, it was also validated, the need for an augmentation was also validated by outside consultants, including Hensel Phelps, which is a major design-build firm, and an outside estimator.
That's all helpful. One question that comes immediately to mind is, how is it that we didn't catch all this a year ago as opposed to just now?
Again, it was more of a conceptual estimate, and that's generally how we go into a capital project. We have a conceptual estimate that is kind of refined throughout the design phase and the planning phase. I think that some of the parties looked at the estimate last year and thought that it was, a tight budget but doable. But now, given the trends in the San Francisco market and considering all the items that were missed, the subterranean issues with the building, I think that it just became clear that it was not a viable budget.
So again, just stating a case for us to substantiate a vote in support of this today, given that this is, as Senator Block has already mentioned, not a project under construction at this point, it's still moving through planning and design, that conceivably this never really was a $38 million project. We're now recognizing in with clearer eyes what the real cost of it is, but there was no waste, fraud, or abuse in any of this as if dollars were squandered during a construction project.
No, sir, absolutely not.
All right, just to clarify that. I think there were a few other comments. Yes, Senator Morlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As another member of Sub 1, we had Mr. David Seward of the campus come and speak to us, and I think our chair gave him a pretty good grilling, if I could use that word. You know, you're asking all the right questions, same. I think Senator Block did a pretty thorough job of addressing all these concerns. And Mr. Seward also met with me privately after the meeting to discuss this concern. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to recommend a yes vote, and I vote, but I am disappointed. But we should use maybe this as an opportunity. Hastings has a board that's comprised of individuals that are appointed by the governor. It's not like a private institution where you pick people of wealth or resources, or, you know, it's just, I don't know what the criteria is, but you certainly, maybe we ought to look at how you comprise the board of Hastings, so you have a body that can then set up a capital campaign committee that could get serious about raising money for this campus. It could have a better endowment fund. I would challenge Hastings to, you know, build a good cadre of graduates to beef up their endowment fund. I'm watching like UCI, University of California, Irvine, in my district. They're raising a lot of money for their endowment fund, and it's a public school, but you can still do something. And I would think at the end of the day, if it ever needed to build another building, it would have the money sitting in its endowment fund. So I would really challenge maybe the state to look at how we deal with this campus, because from what I've seen, it has an illustrious group of graduates that could really do something special. And so that would be my encouragement, Mr. Chair, that we encourage some minor tweaks, or, you know, we encourage the dean to figure out how do you build a committee to really help the endowment and the capital campaign. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Morlock. Senator Glazer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the candid conversation, and those who want to try to find a way to move forward. I guess what's missing for me is any kind of explanation of the accountability for the mistakes. Were these architects, were these project managers, were these people within state employ that somehow made these mistakes? So I'm trying to understand, where's the accountability? I mean, for me to go back and explain a vote in favor, and I know all the good reasons why and the great work of the university, but what did we do to hold those accountable for this significant mistakes, multiple mistakes that we're now being appraised of?
I think that's a reasonable question, Senator Glazer. Does finance have a response?
It was not a group within the state. It was an outside group that performed this estimate, and very reputable company, actually. They're no longer working on this particular project, but again, I think it was just a matter of just not recognizing the specific and unique aspects of both the Hastings program and the site, and the timing of it that was, you know, really drove a poor estimate at the time.
So what became of this contractor?
I do not know. I'm sorry.
And
But they're not working on this project, I can tell you that.
If the end of that relationship came as a result of these kinds of errors that we're talking about today?
I can find that out for you. I actually don't know what their relationship is with the Hastings staff at this point.
Okay. I think that might be helpful for the committee.
Sure.
Senator Nielsen.
Well, I remember the time when Hastings was going to be gone, and I went to bat for Hastings. I felt it was important, and I don't have any regrets about it. But I would say to Hastings, you know, my patience is wearing thin. And were they to come back next year with the same situation, I would be a no. And that's the end of it. Would there not be a way that we could require them to report to us quarterly their progress? I don't know who would do it, but, you know, now this is our progress. We've now got this much done. We've met these benchmarks. That's standard in construction. And that's not hard to do. That's just the way construction projects are done. And it's very disturbing that nothing has been done. And this goes back several years in my recollection, sitting on the Budget Committee. Could not we at least require that? We cannot require them that, you know, don't come back next year again and ask for more money. They can certainly do that. We can't oblige a future legislature. But some of us are still going to be around, and we're not going to be very sympathetic unless they have a showing of good faith. That would at least be a showing of good faith if they regularly reported to us their substantive progress.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. And could you also share with us, what is the timeline for the project? When is the current phase complete? When is their groundbreaking? How long will the construction go on?
Yes, so I'd like to just first address the reporting comment. We do currently, for this item, have budget bill language requiring that Hastings report at the end of the performance criteria phase, which is basically the development of the design criteria phase, on the status of the project, the scope, you know, all the pertinent elements that the legislature would be interested in. So we do have that, and that would be the logical place to do that kind of check-in on this project. And then
That would be before groundbreaking.
Oh, well, before it even gets, a contract gets awarded.
Very good.
Basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, so the timeline, again, this is a design-build project, so there's two phases. There's performance criteria and design-build, and we are currently in the performance criteria phase, which is a very lengthy phase. It requires the programming, as we already mentioned. It also requires development of a request for qualifications, which I know Department of General Services is working on right now to get qualified entities to come in and bid on the project. There's an RFP phase, so it's request for proposal where they determine the qualified entities, and then they all kind of compete for it. It's not really a bid. They compete based on a stipulated sum. So that whole process is going to take until summer of 2017 if we keep on schedule, which we are right now. And then once a design-build entity has been selected, the construction period is expected to be about 24 months. And right now it's moving along very well. But if, you know, without this augmentation, the project will stop.
Thank you. Senator Glazer, do you have another comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a follow-up.
Sure.
And if you'll indulge me, I mean, I wrestle with this information because there's so many people who feel like if you're doing business with the state that, you know, things get obscured and mistakes are kind of forgiven. And I guess what I'm struggling with is that even now that those who were involved in this are still anonymous. And I don't know if they've worked in other projects in state government, where, at what level. But I guess I'm looking for your guidance as to what is appropriate for us in terms of reporting back about a vendor. There's a lot of projects we do in the state where the vendors are very visible. And if it's a failure rate, everybody knows it's a failure, and that's part of the public record. And I guess I don't like the idea that somehow we have a problem. It seems to be an anonymous problem, at least given what's been provided to us today, and that we still haven't, in terms of moving forward, provided the appropriate level of accountability for that mistake. It does happen. But then we want to make sure we don't make it again, whatever, in state government, at whatever level it could happen again. And I just don't see whether we've closed the loop on that. I know we're trying to move forward with this. I get it. But I do hope that maybe with your guidance, I could understand better what we do to make sure that those who did make mistakes, as inadvertent or whatever they may be, that there's a public record of that.
So all your points are well taken, Senator. I would say, though, that I think there has been consequence in that the contractor, and if you could please provide to every member of the committee the name of this contractor with whom we're no longer working with them. So they're out of the project. That's a result, I would imagine, of the errors that were made. And that's just during the performance criteria phase. So I think it'd be another thing if we've moved them on to another project or we've given them more responsibility, they're cut off.
But we don't know who they are and where else they may be working. The only thing we've gotten is a reputable contractor. That's all we heard. And I don't know if they're working elsewhere in state government, but I think it'd be helpful to know that.
So we'd like the name, and if you can determine if there are any other projects they're working on, I would agree with Senator Glazer. I don't care how reputable, they've not provided the service that is deserving of the state. And I wouldn't understand why we're offering them further contracts to put ourselves in future situations, not unlike the one we're in today. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up, I see that there's two ways that we can point a finger at this problem. I assume that when we hired this firm, whose name will, I guess, go unmentioned, that we put out an RFP to get them. And I assume that the RFP is pretty clear about what we're building. We're building a campus facility. We're not building a vanilla type of a commercial structure like you're talking about. So is it fair to assume that the RFP was written appropriately, or was this particular contractor just responding to an RFP that might have been flawed?
I don't have that information, but I will provide that to you.
Okay, so before we admonish a contractor, we may have some, problems within. However, if the contractor that bid on the specifications that were being offered by the state didn't follow those specifications, I assume we spent a significant amount of money for them to come up with this conceptual design. If they are at fault, I think the taxpayers deserve to be reimbursed for the cost of their services that are now requiring us now to consider a 50% cost overrun, either because of their negligence or the negligence on behalf of our State Department that wrote the RFP in a flawed way. So I'd like to get a report back to find out. I don't want to admonish or embarrass a contractor that was only responding to the document that was given to them when, in fact, we may have some problems within our own organization.
Understood. We'll get back to you with that. Thank you.
Senator Stone, I agree with all your comments, too. I just want to be careful with our own wording. I don't think we categorize what's before us today as cost overrun because the project hasn't even begun yet. It was poor estimating from the very beginning. So, again, I just want to assure colleagues, this is not about cost overruns. This is not about costs that resulted in waste. This was just a very early planning error, and we're recognizing as the error that it was. And I think the questions that both Senator Glazer and Senator Stone have asked, we do want responses for it.
Yes.
Including our own potential internal errors, as you pointed out, Senator. Senator Bell.
Just, can you tell me the status of your construction drawings for the project? Or how close are you to completing all that?
Well, as part of the design build procurement method, I mentioned that we're currently in the performance criteria phase. So drawings really won't occur until we contract with the design build firm. So the performance criteria phase is really where all the kind of conceptual components and all the building requirements are developed. And maybe there might be could include some conceptual drawings, but the actual design will not occur until we contract with the design build entity next year.
So you have like, you have no design drawing, or you have any conceptual design drawings?
There may be some conceptual design drawings. I'd have to check with the Department of General Services on that, but generally in this procurement method, which is used more and more frequently across the state because it delivers projects quicker, this initial phase just in very great detail identifies both the program requirements for the building and the mechanical and electrical and other internal requirements of the building, and that the design, the purpose of engaging with the design build team is to have them do the design, and then they also do the construction so that they're all one entity, done under one entity.
So when what's the timing for the bids? When do you think the bid date will be?
So I believe it's next September. Would they expect to contract with the design build
17?
team? Yes.
So you escalated up to 17, is all the numbers in here?
Yes.
This is all included in this
Yes.
price here that you estimate?
The escalation.
55.6. The design process, are you completed with any kind of scope changes in the project? Are you capping the price to 5.6 in any way? Or is it just going to keep going up? Wouldn't people decide to make changes as they go along?
Well, that's the beauty of a design-build procurement method, is that the design-build entities compete based on a stipulated sum, and so they guarantee to deliver the project for that sum without change orders. And they also incorporate in additional design elements that maybe set them apart from their.
Yeah, but you haven't finished the scope of the design-build contract yet, right? You're still putting stuff in there, basically.
Well, the scope of the project is pretty well defined.
Pretty well defined.
The scope of the project is well defined. Now it's just developing the criteria that the design-build entities can bid.
Okay, so you got kind of your scope pretty well set, you're not changing it?
No, there's no plan to change it.
Okay.
Pretty set, yes.
Well, so you're at $975 a square foot, right?
It's about $636 a square foot,
Yeah,
the hard construction costs, and then on top of that, you have escalation.
I count everything.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think that's fine. We have the testimony. We got their testimony that they're not making big scope changes, which is what I heard. I like that. I think that's a fair statement, if that's what the situation is. And the price of bids are subject to the market, if you want to say it that way. So hopefully we get good prices in September of 2017. Is that correct?
Yes, and just to emphasize once again, based on the full budgeted amount that we hope to go forward with, which is the $55.6 million, that number will be capped so that it won't really be affected by market changes.
You put contingencies in your estimates?
Yes, yes.
How much?
I do not know off the top of my head.
5%, 10%, whatever? Bid estimates are contingent. So you have a contingency factor.
Let's see. 3%.
Okay, good. Mr. Chairman, I would support the project. I think we're kind of down the road here. I think the process, however, for the Senate committee to review this was not correct, and we ought to figure out a better process for getting estimates and what kind of things we require before we approve things. So I don't know if the committee can work on that, probably. Like when we review a plan for a project, we should have the specificity and set some guidelines for these departments, GSA, to submit certain specified information. So and an understanding that we're not going to establish something and then have a large number of scope changes that occur afterwards, after we approve the budget, so that the project costs fly out of hand. So I would recommend approval, but I want to understand that, we ought to have a process for, our review of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bell. I'm going to take that as a motion, if that's okay with you, which is to approve as proposed. And then just, I asked a question earlier. I don't know that we got a response. What would be the consequence if the committee were not to approve?
The project would stop.
Project would just stop.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is there any public comment on this? Yes, I'm sorry, Senator Morlock, you did have one more question.
I just wanted to say that Mr. Seward is, I believe, available in the room. If you still wanted to ask questions on this matter, he could probably provide some of the detail that Senator Bell was looking for.
Thank you for noting that. That's not too much the process here at Budget Committee right now, but if a colleague wanted to ask, I wouldn't deny them a question.
I have a question. I'm not sure who's best to answer, who's best qualified to answer it.
Okay,
But you had asked.
let's try LAO or DOF.
You had asked the question, what would happen if we didn't further fund this? If we didn't further fund this and the project stopped, how much of the monies that were allocated to this prior would be returned to the state?
We've encumbered 1.9 million for the performance criteria phase. We do have a contract also with a master architect, and so there would be some consequences related to that. There would be probably some portion of the 1.9 that would be returned, but that would be the extent of it at this point.
Good question, Senator. Thank you for that. Call the roll, please.
Leno,
Aye.
Nielsen, Allen, Anderson, Bell, Block, Glazer, Hancock, Mitchell, Monning, Morlock, Wynn, Pan, Pavley, Roth, Stone, Wolk.
The vote is 11-3. The motion is approved. And though Senator Bell stepped out just momentarily, we otherwise have a full House, and I was going to suggest that we lift a few of the calls to bring us up to date. So I believe we have, could you confirm for me, did we close the roll on issue 15, which was precision medicine, and issue 14, which was Go Biz? No, those are open as well. Okay. So then, starting with item 3, if you could please call the absent members, please.